everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone.
Are you okay?
I was looking at a text message as you were doing your little...
Yeah, it's mesmerized. I like the camera switched to you, and you were like mesmerized in the middle distance.
I know. I was looking at something that my daughter had sent me about a documentary. And I love documentaries. And so it grabbed my attention.
Moth to a flame. Yeah.
But I'm here now. I'm present.
Well,
I'm here with you.
I'm glad to see you. I'm glad you remembered to show up.
Thank you. You
What?
too.
Did you see what I did just right there?
I know exactly what you did.
We're talking about memory today, memory and ADHD. Do you run into this a lot with people dealing with memory and ADHD? Can you describe the context that it usually shows up?
That it's hard to remember things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah. No, it's hard to remember things. It's hard when somebody in passing, asks you to do something or says, hey, can you do this? Or in some cases, you need to do this.
Right.
And then you forget. And so there's a lot of bad feelings because it's not the intention to forget, but it's definitely a symptom of ADHD.
Yeah.
And that's why, over this series, we talked about lying, we've talked about over talking, and now we're talking about memory because it is something that is so common and is frustrating to people because their intention is not to make others mad or to not remember. It really, you forget.
Yeah. Well, it is a complicated thing. And I think coming to terms or at least understanding the various associations with different kinds of memory, different contexts in which memory plays a part in your life with your ADHD, it's important. And it is so complex, in fact, that we have a fantastic guest to talk to us about it.
Yes,
our dear friend,
do.
Dr. Ari Tuckman is back to talk to us about memory. He's been on several times before, and we haven't seen him in a long time, and we're really glad he is here. Before we get into it, though, head over to TakeControlADHD.com. You can get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list, and we will send you an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest at Take Control ADHD. But if you really want to hang out with us, you got to head over to the ADHD Discord community. Just visit TakeControlADHD.com/Discord. You'll be whisked over to the general community invitation. And if you want even more than the general community, well, I'm so glad you asked how you could be a part of that too. Just become a patron at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Now, Patreon for us is listener-supported podcasting. For a few dollars a month, you can help guarantee that we continue to grow the show, add new features, invest more heavily in our community. We've got all kinds of wonderful things going on in that community. We've got early access to the podcast, member-only feeds, the placeholder podcast with yours truly. We've got the Pete's Coffee Tech Chat once a month. We've got the happy hour. We've got coaching with Nikki once a month. All these fantastic opportunities to bring like-minded folks together. It is, I hope you find when you get in there that it is eye-opening how many people are with you living with the same frustrations, and they're all in here helping each other out. It's really a joy. And I should say, they're in our chat room right now watching the live stream, which you also get access to as a supporting member. So that is it. Patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more. Welcome all of our new members. You're great. What else do you have to say? Do you have any news?
No news.
That's it?
Yep.
That's all the news?
Let's go. Let's talk to Ari.
Ari Tuckman is back with us. Dr. Ari Tuckman is back. Ari, it has been way too long. The last time you've been on now and you've talked to us about lying. You've talked to us about, oh my gosh, have you been on 3 or 4 times you've been on the show?
I think
Is
it's
it just
two.
2?
I think we did lying, we did relationships. I think one of them, Nikki
It was the
sick or
lying one.
something,
That was
the
you
lying.
and I
You
were
and me,
a dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Well, it is
Only show
I know.
I've ever missed.
crazy.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
Is that an honor?
Dubious.
Well,
for sure.
it meant I was really, really sick.
I say on the ADHD guys, I've never missed a show, so I don't know if that's an honor or a slight. Let's just say that.
Well, you have to be here because I can't do the stuff you do. So if you don't show up, no one's going to be here.
Yes.
Right.
Well, all right. We are talking today about ADHD and memory. Recent study found that 81% of adolescents with ADHD surveyed suffered from some deficit to their working memory. So, Ari, we are here with you to help educate us on what is going on. What are the kinds of memory that we need to be thinking about, and how does ADHD impact it? And then hopefully you have some direction for us to help us through the muck.
Yeah. So first of all, we talk about memory as if it's like one thing. Memory is not one thing. Memory is lots of things, right? So let's just quickie there. So working memory, which is a term that probably a lot of people have at least heard, whether they understand it or not, but at least they've heard it, right? So working memory is one of the executive functions. It's the most immediate, shortest kind of memory. It's sort of like when you take a phone number off a piece of paper and start typing it into your phone. That's working memory. That's holding that on deck. When you're talking to someone, you're like, "Ooh, I have a thought. I'm gonna wait, and then I'm gonna say it." Hopefully, that's working memory holding on. Or working memory is working. It's actively holding. Or another way of thinking about it is working memory is basically storing what we are paying attention to.
Okay.
Right. So whatever is up front of mind in the moment. So there's that. Then there's other types of kind of shorter term memory, which is a little bit longer than working memory. So in 20 minutes, I need to remember to whatever. There's long-term memory, which is, could be, remember in third grade when whatever happened. So episodic, right, events in our life. Then there's more kind of factual or declarative knowledge. So like, Columbus discovered America in 1492, if that's kind of still, I don't know, whatever. But or H2O is the symbol for water, right? So there's stuff like that. There's prospective memory, right? Remembering forward. Oh, tomorrow I have to blah, 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 right? So all these different kinds of memory, right? So when we talk about memory, sometimes it matters exactly what kind we're talking about.
Prospective memory is, it feels strange doing an ADHD podcast and never having uttered the words prospective memory. That is a new term to me. Remembering forward.
Yeah.
So that's remembering that you have an appointment next week. Or
and
without looking at a calendar.
And it seems so directly related to the ADHD experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of it, in like some perspective memory is rather short term, like 5 minutes from now. Or here I am kind of grabbing my junk out of the car. Wait, where are my keys? Or it could be, some time specific thing. Next Wednesday at 3, I have a dentist appointment. Or it could be like, oh, next time I see Nikki, I need to tell her blah, blah, blah. And that might be tomorrow or in a month or in a year. But, so sometimes the trigger is a time, sometimes the trigger is an event. So, it all gets a bit nuanced, but I think it's really interesting, frankly.
Well, and I think I remember reading something in one of your workbooks about when you remember something and it's the wrong time of remembering it. So like if you're in the car and you realize, oh, I forgot I needed to make this phone call before I left. Is that part of the prospective memory or is that something different?
Yeah, no. So that is prospective memory. I have to make this phone call. But, the problem is it's sort of it got triggered at the wrong time, right? In the car is not maybe the time to make that phone call.
Right.
Right. And remembering before it's time also isn't that helpful either.
Right.
Like it might reinforce it like, oh yeah, remember that call, but it's not the time to act. So perspective memory is all about kind of point of performance, like the time and place or place that you can do the thing. And, this is definitely one of those places where folks with ADHD struggle, right? That they might remember to do it, but not at the right time. So either it's too late or it's too early or whatever. And unfortunately, we often don't get partial credit for remembering afterwards.
Right.
But
right.
can't we get partial credit for other stuff? Because I need to start, like,
Yeah.
I call these tasks,
Yeah.
the French have this term, l'escalier, or l'esprit de l'escalier, I think, is escalator wit, right? It's a way to define humor that comes too late. It's that thing, like, you remember a joke, but you're already on the escalator and you forgot to say it when you were with your friends, or a comeback or something. That it defines that. For me, I have always associated these kinds of tasks where I remember to do something when the context has already shifted, or I haven't arrived at that context yet and risk forgetting it, an escalator task. Like, it's a thing that just doesn't fit the here and now. And that has always been a model that's really helped me to at least have a bucket of escalator tasks that I need to circle around to every day.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? It's like success in life is about doing the right things at the right time and place. You know, it's about getting it. It's about kind of the coordination. It's kind of hitting the mark in the right way at the right time. So, like, there are definitely some things that we can go back and you do them late and it's not that big a deal. But there are other things that it is, right? You know, so things like, I don't know, buying airline tickets, you know, like if you wait too long, there aren't the flights that you want, you know, or they're not the price or whatever. So,
make any bills.
So,
I mean, anytime you're paying bills, then you're incurring late fees if you weren't able to put those in the bucket. And you know, this idea that fighting to keep track of all of these things is, it seems to be the sort of muscular tissue tied to present and future anxiety, right? I might not even know what's in my escalator bucket. I just know that I should feel bad about something.
Sure. Yeah. It's that ticking time bomb, right? I don't even know what's going to blow up on me tomorrow. It's probably something, but I don't even know what it is. As opposed to, I definitely know because I didn't get my boss that thing I said I was going to yesterday, right? And I don't know, there's kind of, sometimes knowing is worse, sometimes not knowing is worse. I guess it depends. But you know, the sort of, there is this thing of this, like, just overhanging feeling of, I don't even know what the axe over my neck is, you know, like, and that is draining. Like, it burns a lot of mental energy.
Well, and I can also see, like, a situation where, you know, you're in a meeting and there's really important information and you know you need to remember it all, but it's almost so overwhelming because it's coming all at you, right? Like, and then feeling like you're missing something, or you forget, like, they did say something, but you really don't remember them saying it, you know, because you're trying to process all this information. That would be another example of working memory, right? Because it's it's that immediate. So what about, like, this has nothing to do with necessarily ADHD, but, like, just with age. Like, somebody will say something to me and remember this. I really do not remember, like, no clue that this happened, that I said it. Like, is that just an age thing? Because, you know, I'm turning 50 in like a month. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Welcome to the birthday anxiety show, Ari. You didn't know this is what you were getting.
Like,
we're glad you're here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'm a couple years ahead of you on that one. But I mean, some of it is age, like a little bit of that is age. Certainly menopause is not your friend when it comes to this kind of stuff. So that's probably the more likely culprit.
Right.
And just,
I've been told that too, Ari Tuckman.
Yes, I know.
Thanks a lot.
Right. I'm familiar with the process. So, But I mean, also just in general, right? Like, being overwhelmed, having too much on your mind in general, feeling stretched too thin, or just in that moment being a bit preoccupied. You know, it's sort of like the information doesn't get taken in, held in attention, processed, and then passed back into long-term memory. So it's not actually a memory problem in the sense that, like, your hard drive doesn't work. It's that the hard drive didn't get enough, you know? And that's a thing where then your friend says, no, remember, right? You know, blah, blah, blah. And this was happening. And then this, and you're like, oh, Okay, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of something that got written onto the hard drive,
Hmm.
but not enough that you could like bing spontaneously kind of pull it forth.
Right.
And sometimes it's like ain't nothing there where you're like, I have absolutely
Hmm.
no memory of that. I'm not even sure that that was me.
Hmm.
But it seems like a memory problem. It's really more of an attention problem in the sense that you didn't have your full attention, so the information didn't flow through attention and back into long-term memory. Or alternatively, it might be a thing that at the moment where you're trying to recall it, if you're again otherwise kind of preoccupied or whatever, you're not putting your full resources to drawing it out of long-term memory.
Hmm. So would mindfulness be something where if you practice that, like if you're really trying to be very present in the
Mhm.
moment, would that help you
Sure.
capture that memory and have it store into long-term memory?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely.
Okay.
And just in general, I think about all this sort of like good communication advice, all this ADHD communication advice, which is really just good
Advice,
general
right,
Mhm.
for
communication
everybody.
advice. Like, yeah, like
For
don't be
anyone.
looking at your phone, don't have the TV on, don't have, kids and dogs running through the room when you're trying to talk, right? Like,
Yeah.
summarize what you said, ask questions, right? Like all that stuff is really about helping us kind of keep the desired information front and center in attention,
Hmm.
process it enough to really kind of understand it and do something with it. So then it gets chucked back into long-term memory.
Well, that implies that attention, like distraction, is the enemy of both making memories and it's the enemy of recall.
And
Yeah.
keeping them. Yeah.
It's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
I'm always a little surprised when I'll talk to like a newer client and I'll ask them like how do they capture their tasks or how do they kind of organize their projects, and it doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while I'll have that person that says, oh, I keep everything in my head.
Oh, are they 15-year-old boys with ADHD?
Are you in my house right now? For crying out
No,
loud.
that's the thing. Yeah.
Because all my
Because
15-year-old boys with ADHD that I see,
that's what
they
they
don't have
think.
to
That's
write
right.
it down.
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, for
They
sure.
also haven't
well, I
showered
have a
in, like,
20-year-old
6
who
days.
thinks the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and haven't cleaned their
Right.
room or taken the trash out.
Right.
So yeah, I get that.
Right.
No, but it is always surprising to me a little bit that they I think they truly believe that, but yet you're coming to coaching because obviously there's an issue here
Sure.
of not remembering or not getting things done. So, I mean, I will always say like that's not a great strategy. Like we don't want to
Yeah.
keep it in your head. But what would you say if somebody says, "Well, I just keep it in my head"?
Yeah. So this is definitely a thing that I've got some thoughts and even a couple lines on. So,
Mhm.
almost never when somebody tells me that do I have the thought, wow, I've just met the great Kreskin with the amazing
Yeah.
memory.
Boy,
Right.
they really
Who has
have it
Usually what I
together.
ADHD? Yeah.
Right. They have this spectacular photographic memory, right?
Right.
Partially because Nikki, like you said, if they're killing it, why are they paying you?
Right.
Right. They got better things to do than hang out with us. No offense to either of
Yeah,
us, right?
totally.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So usually what I think is either you have no idea how much you're forgetting,
Mm-hmm.
or there's a bit of resistance to actually addressing how much you're forgetting or something, So usually the line that I take with this is if you can remember inside your head everything you have going on in your life, then you don't have enough going on in your life. Like you want a
Yeah.
life that's busy enough, that's interesting, that has got a bunch of different, maybe it's just me, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like you want a lot of stuff going on so that it exceeds your internal memory capacity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rich,
Mhm. That's a good
fulfilling,
point.
right?
Yeah.
Balancing and stretching you in new ways.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, we didn't set this thing up like 20 minutes ago, right? You
Right.
didn't just call me and say, hey, are you free now? Let's do it, right? Like,
Right.
I don't know when we set this up, a month ago or something. So,
Yeah.
like, obviously this went into my calendar. So,
Mhm.
but I mean, the other thing of it is sometimes the folks who say they can just remember everything are also then the ones who, I don't know, let's just say are not happy with other people kind of nudging them, nagging them, poking at them about stuff. But what they're not necessarily fully appreciating is if you don't do it, other people will step in for you, usually your mom, right?
Mhm.
Or your spouse or
Mhm.
your boss or your coworker, right? Just because like your lack of paying attention to it is making them anxious, right? They see what isn't getting done. So it kind of becomes this kind of like, I don't know, this kind of like antagonistically dependent kind of a interaction or relationship, right? Don't tell me what to do, except I need you to like, wait, mom, when is that?
Yeah.
Or, so it's like they don't like it, but they can't change it either. And hopefully then, fingers crossed, that by better understanding their ADHD, by maybe talking to someone, maybe a little bit of the right medication, now they have the option to actually be able to track this stuff in a way that's actually helpful and hits the mark often enough. So maybe now it's worth kind of taking a chance and not just doing this whole like, well, I don't really care, whatever, which is kind of a way of not having to put themselves out there and risk failure.
So there's a resistance sometimes from people that don't want their computer to tell them what to do. So they don't want the computer or the, reminder, do this, do that.
Sure.
But yet they're still looking for that some kind of structure, to put these thoughts and these things that they need to remember. Any happy medium that you found that's like flexible enough for the ADHD mind, but still gives you, that those reminders that when we need them?
Sure. Yeah. So this totally kind of feeds into what I'm going to be talking about at the big ADHD conference that Chad, Ada, and ACO are doing. So in November in Dallas. But, so I often have this thing come up where, clients will say, oh, I've tried setting alarms, but, they don't work because I just turn off the alarm and I don't do the thing anyway. And, my response to that is, no, actually the alarm did exactly the thing it's supposed to do. The point of an alarm is it makes you aware. Oh yeah, that thing at this time, here we are. What it doesn't do is make you motivated to do it. That's a different job. Like you need a different tool for that job. So now of course, if you don't have awareness, game over, right? We're done. So setting some sort of a reminder, an alarm, whether it's your computer, your phone, or a person in your life, right? Like to see it as all this is doing is making me aware. I now have an opportunity to think about whether I actually want to do this or not, right? So it doesn't make you do it. It just gives you the opportunity to think about it. And, maybe it isn't the time. Or maybe, frankly, it is the time, even though you don't feel like doing it, right? So then you need to really think about, like, what am I doing with this? Does this make the cut? Is this important to me? Why is this important to me? How am I going to feel about this later? Not do I want to do this now? Because probably the answer is no. But by the way, the answer will also be no tomorrow or next week, So, but how am I going to feel about this later? Why does this matter? Why is this important? Right. That's how you get to the motivation to actually do the thing. And, in the bigger picture is to sort of think about it. Like, is this worth it to me? If I set these reminders or create a schedule or tell someone I'm going to do something, right? Do I want to be held to it? Because if I can accept that I might have to be held to it because there's enough benefit, fine. If I don't want to be held to it, then make that decision up front and say, like, look, I'm not going to do this. Or maybe I will, maybe I won't. I can't promise you either way. So sometimes that's kind of part of it, is being more sort of more intentional about what you agree to or not.
Well, and it's more empowering, I think, that way, right? Because I think that if you don't have the reminder and you forget, then that power kind of choice is taken away from you because it's already passed and you forgot to do it and you didn't get to do it. But when you have the reminder, you get that empowerment of making that choice and thinking about those choice or those questions that you were asking to make a decision that later you can say, I made that decision because of this. It wasn't just taken from me because I didn't remember.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, right? Make an affirmative decision, right? Own it. Either way. I don't care what you decide, right? But make a real decision. To say, oh, I'll just remember it. It's a bit of a passive decision. You're kind of not like you're sort of making the choice without actually having to leave your fingerprints on it.
Right.
All right. Forgive my colorful language, but my inner child is a 15-year-old petulant dick, and I
it's out now. We all know
it's out,
right?
Yeah, and so you first of all reframing. You know, Nikki and I were just having this conversation about reframing not just what an alarm does, but what a therapist does or an ADHD coach does. Right? They're not there to remind you to do the thing and then do the thing for you, whatever the thing is.
Right.
This idea of of discovering that well of motivation and coming to terms with is this thing important to me is such a critical step. And I know we're talking about memory, but insofar as you have some thoughts on helping one build a stronger relationship with that 15-year-old petulant dick, because I'm not alone. I don't want to out anybody in the chat room, but they're outing themselves, and they all agree they're all fighting the same kid in themselves. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. This is definitely it's big and important, and it does go deeper, right? Like memory is sort of a little bit simple and kind of, I don't know, just cognitive, strategic, tactical, whatever. But there is this kind of deeper emotional part, and you know, a lot of the work that I do when I see the 15-year-old dicks is to help them figure out, like, what do you actually want? Like, we know what your parents and teachers or whoever, like, we know their opinions about you. What do you actually want? What matters to you? And I can totally appreciate this sort of oppositional thing of don't tell me what to do. I work for myself, so, I'm not a stranger to that thought.
Sure.
And yet, is it really serving you? Like, are you picking the right battles, or are you just picking battles to fight? Or are you picking a battle because you don't actually know what you want, right? What am I doing with myself here? Is school actually important to me? What does it get me? Am I willing to suffer for it? And in that case, somebody giving you a reminder is not necessarily just for their agenda. It might also be for yours. Like, what do I stand to gain in this?
I can impersonate somebody who has it together pretty quickly. Right. I can also know that he's screaming back here all the time. And that sometimes that works. Sometimes that allows you to just get over whatever the next hump is. But at some point, you've got to. I think there's, like, addressing your point. You realize what is important to me. For example, is the pain that I'm experiencing now, or the action I'm about to take just because it's a dopamine hit, worth the pain that I will suffer as a relation to it later, that isn't immediate pain, that sort of either delayed or intermittent reinforcement of pain is sometimes the trick that allows me to keep like having the fight and not just coming to terms.
And that's definitely true. I mean, there's a number of things you said. So the intermittentness of it, like, ooh, I might get away with it. And that's true, right? You might actually. So, like, let's be honest, you got to put that into the math. But there's also the part, and I mean, we all do this to some extent, but some people in the world do it much more. And folks with ADHD tend to be in that latter group of, that we don't feel the future as much as we feel the present.
Yes.
So the suffering of doing the thing you don't want to do right now feels much bigger than the reward for doing it, the later reward for doing it, or the later suffering for not having done it. So, so it becomes a bit of an unfair fight, right? It's hard to talk yourself into it. It just doesn't feel worth it. And then later, by the time you do feel it, it's kind of too late maybe to change it.
Right, right. So all of the alarms that we set also need to be accompanied by something that has immediate reinforcement, some sort of traps, or, electricity has been used in these sorts of cases before.
The shock tato.
Right, shock tato. I still have it here.
See, this is a potato that shocks you.
This is no longer on the market,
interesting
Ari.
tool.
This is you turn it on and it plays the music to Psycho. And when the music stops, it shocks the crap out of you.
Wow.
And so you have to, like, throw it. But it's also
you have
broken.
To go do something.
And so it sometimes doesn't shock you, but sometimes shocks you real hard. So
Wow.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
So you're not
that's
supposed
fun.
to drop it until
You're
you
supposed
do
to,
the task?
yeah. You hold it till you do the task. Oh God, must finish email.
This is so hard one-handed.
That positive psychology, positive
Yeah,
reinforcement. We
mindfulness.
don't know.
Must
We don't do
be
that. We just
Right.
shock each other and it gets done.
Right.
Yeah, no. But one thing I do want to highlight, just because I think it's an important distinction, is what you said earlier, Ari, about like the tool isn't the alarm is just the tool to remind you. It's not the motivator. And I think that's really important for people to hear, because I think it's really easy to immediately believe alarms don't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't work for me, or this, I can't do a planner, or I can't do the calendar's always a mess. Like when you can separate the tool of it being a tool, and then what are the other strategies to get you started and to make it happen. Kind of two different things that we're talking about.
And isn't this also what causes us to kick our reminders to the next day? Like I'll get an alert that says, Pete, do this thing on this day. And I'll see it and I'll be like, oh, but it just reminded me. It did its job. And now I'm going to say, remind me again tomorrow. And we'll see what the list of red tasks looks like. Really, that it sounds to me like that reconditioning is this is not, this hasn't met me at the intersection of interest and goodwill, right? At some point it
but it might also, the other piece of it is sometimes, like whenever I talk about setting reminders, to actually pause for a sec and think about it. Like, okay, so where will I be at that time? What's actually out? What else is going on? Is this a likely good time, or is this not? Right. So some of the magic of setting reminders is being a little bit intentional about when the reminder goes off. So it's more likely to happen. But, there's also the thing of like, I don't know, Pete, I got to think at least sometimes I'm going to give you some credit here, right? Strategically speaking, it's actually not the time to do that thing. Like I'm actually doing more important things.
Right.
So like, sorry, reminded thing, you don't make the cut. You're not number one right now. And to slide it off is actually kind of a reasonable choice. So kind of give yourself credit for those moments. Also give yourself credit for sliding the reminder to another time, not just turning it off. Right.
Well, and to I'll lean in on you giving me credit. This is where I come back to, visual scheduling, like block scheduling actual tasks on my calendar. I would be completely hopeless if I didn't have my weekly calendar and see a task come up and say, okay, I'm going to move that to another open spot on my calendar rather than, just not doing it or putting it on the same time tomorrow. Like that process for me has saved my life, right? Being able to be intentional about that. I couldn't do my ADHD without it, right? That's my accommodation. So,
but that is exactly what I recommend. Like I'm so glad that you're saying that, is scheduling time non-specific tasks into your schedule, right? So not just to-do lists. To-do lists are graveyards of failed aspirations, like maybe one day I'll do this, but it's also kind of like, oh, here's a thing. Is now the time? I don't know. Maybe. What about this other thing next to it? I don't know. Maybe, or the other one. Maybe that's actually the thing to do, right? So it's sort of like a lot of nothing happens.
Or I'd rather just pet my new kitten.
Yeah, right.
That
of
sounds
course,
like fun.
That is always the better, the more enjoyable option.
Yeah.
Right? So like that's not even a competition.
Right.
So, so actually taking stuff from the to-do list and sticking it in your schedule at specific times. So it's not just appointments or meetings that have a specific time that go into your schedule, but this other stuff gets put in there too, makes it way more likely that it's going to happen. I mean, it's not a blood oath, right? You're not like held to it, but it tips the odds.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the way I think about it. And I think, the benefit of this kind of block scheduling for me is that when a reminder comes up for a thing on my calendar, the one thing I'm not looking at is my to-do list with all the other stuff to choose from. I'm eliminating choice. If it's that one thing that's on my schedule and a new kitten, I only have to make a decision between those two things, not the other 50 tasks that are on my schedule for today and a kitten.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we do have a new
exactly.
kitten. His name is Toby.
Of course you do.
I'll show.
Nice.
I'll have pictures. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
Can we?
But
Go ahead, Nikki. Sorry.
I bet Pete, you're going to say the same thing.
You do it though.
I bet.
It's your show.
Okay. Well, I just want to go back to the memory and like, are there some tangible like takeaways that people that are listening can say, hey, I want to try this, or, you know, some strategies or things about that working memory?
I mean, some of this is, you know, like what we're talking in terms of the scheduling is kind of capturing it,
Mhm.
right? So it's not in your head. You're kind of, as Barkley says, you externalize it,
Mhm.
right? Take it out of your head and put it out onto something, right? So by intentionally planning out your schedule or taking a reminder and putting it into your schedule or whatever, it offloads it from your memory. So then your memory can do the other things that it has to remember.
Can you can I
but I think
inject something here? I need you
Yeah.
to say out loud that offloading or externalizing the things that you feel are important for you to do is not a failure of you as a person, because I hear that all the time, right?
Let me come back to my line. If you can remember inside your head everything you have going on in your life is
Yeah.
too damn boring. Like, come on,
Mhm.
man, you got to have
Yeah.
more than that.
It's not a
Yeah.
moral
Yeah.
failing, right? You're still a good
No.
person.
Like, here's the thing, folks who don't have ADHD, who are highly productive and effective, you think they're not writing stuff down? Like,
God.
really? You
Yeah.
think they're just winging it through their day?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
no,
I interrupted
not
you.
happening.
Please go on.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point that, you know, there are folks who feel like it's a shortcoming. If I write it down, people are going to think I'm dumb or something,
Mhm.
you know, but I don't know. Hell, I would rather be known as that guy who's always writing stuff down as opposed to that damn guy who's always forgetting things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So if you know yourself, then act on it, right? Like say, hey, give me a sec, let me write this down. And almost no one is going to be offended. They're all going to say, awesome,
Mhm.
that person is taking this seriously. I'm so glad that they want to do this thing I'm talking to them about.
Mhm.
Or I don't know, if they catch you in the middle of something, don't just be like, oh, I'll try to remember it. Say, hey, do me a favor. I'm sort of in the middle of something. I can't really write this down. Shoot me a quick text or send me an email or catch me tomorrow, or right. So like give them a little bit of a job
Mhm.
that will make them happier in the end. They're not doing you a favor, they're doing them a favor,
Mhm.
right? Because you forgetting it does not do them a favor, right? Like they are not better off for you
Right.
forgetting. So, you know, a little bit of effort on their part, they will be happier for it. But you have to have that ability to be sort of confident enough in yourself, to be accepting enough of yourself. But, you know, the other side of it, this is a line from Stephanie Sarkis, who actually forgot she said it and then heard me say it and then started quoting me. She
how
gave
funny.
me credit for it, which is just, she's just a good friend that she comes up with an awesome line and then gives me credit for it. But so Steph has this awesome line where she says, ADHD is the worst kept secret, right? Like you think people don't know that you forget stuff? Really?
Yeah.
Like seriously, you think that's gonna work out, right? You know, it's like being 6 months pregnant. Like, oh, don't tell any, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, they already know. Like,
Yeah.
trust me, they already know. So at least if you can show a seriousness of purpose, if you can show that you're responsible, that you are working at least as hard as them, they will appreciate it and they will overlook the rest. It's when they don't think that you're trying, that's when people are going to be, you know, much less forgiving.
I can see that being really important in relationships between
Yes.
partners and spouses. And that I'm trying. Like I am trying to not forget that it's important to you for me to do this. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to quote somebody else. So Jessica McCabe, I
Mhm.
did a thing on her channel and she had this awesome line where she said, talking about, you know, like kind of leaving a mess for her roommate. And she's like, she had this line where she said, this is me trying.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not the outcome the roommate was hoping.
Yeah.
And it's not what the roommate would have done. Right. Because the roommate, I think, is, you know, more easily organized than she is.
Mhm.
But it's, the line is important because this is me trying. Like I am actually doing the best that I can here, even if it falls short from what you are hoping for. But again, most people, unless they're a giant dick, are going to be kind of forgiving if there's effort and intention. Where we become less forgiving is when it feels intentional. You don't care enough or you're purposely sticking it on me or whatever, that's where the real problems in relationships come from, whether it's romantic relationships, roommates, coworkers, neighbors, whatever.
Yeah.
So put in the effort and make sure that the other person knows that you're putting in the effort, especially when the outcome doesn't seem to indicate the level of effort you've put in.
That's great.
One last question. Can you comment on state dependent memory?
Sure.
Well, you have to tell me what that even means. State
Well,
dependent
I'll let Ari
memory.
do
What
that.
does that mean? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This is like a Psych
Yes.
101
Yes,
term.
it is.
So, yeah. So the idea is, so the state that you're in makes it easier to remember, or if you're in the same state when you're trying to remember it, you're more likely to remember something that happened when you're in that same state when you recorded the memory. So
like if I'm at a wedding and I'm happy, I might remember my own wedding when I was happy at that wedding or something. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Like I'm
that
in
you
the
might
same
have,
state. Yeah.
Yeah, that you might access those memories of your own wedding more readily, or I don't know, if you're depressed, you're going to remember more negative things. If you're happy, you'll remember more positive things. So, I mean, I do think that that's a thing, because we sort of take cues from the situation that we're in externally around us, but also internally in terms of how we feel. So that is definitely a thing that happens.
Okay.
So I guess my question, Pete, to you is, where are you going with
when I was in college, taking Psych 101, undoubtedly, I would find myself with a study group, and we would just, college, so stupid. Like the thing that they give you all day long is just massive free, fountain drinks at the cafeteria. You can go in any of the dorm cafeterias and give you this eco tumbler that's like 64 ounces, but you put it on, strap it to your backpack, and you wander around drinking free sodas all day long. And I would find that we'd stay up all night studying, probably for Psych 101, and would be remembering all these things and quizzing each other, and we'd be doped up on caffeine and then do terribly on the test, until we started doping up on caffeine right before the exams. And we always wrote that off to that's state-dependent memory. We got to get ourselves up. And I'm wondering if we're lying to ourselves and each other, retroactively. And is there any sense to figuring out, or at least being cognizant of your state as you're trying to remember important things?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably both, right? I'm sure the caffeine itself, neurologically was helpful.
There are all kinds of ways
but not healthy.
Way too many ways we're lying to ourselves. There.
Right.
That's true.
Right. But probably, I think there's something to it, right? Like that being in that same state probably did help. But I think the sort of the takeaway on this is, when we're trying to remember something, is to either physically put yourself into that environment, or emotionally into that state, or at least mentally, because you can't always get there, to just sort of think around it. So what was going on, and who was there, and what was I wearing, and let me try to picture this, and what happened before and what happened after, and to try to sort of rebuild the scenario, because the more cues you have, the more sort of webs in to that piece that you can't quite grab, that piece that's out of your memory. So I don't know. I remember, this was long ago, I was talking to a drummer from some band that I saw, and I ran into him in a different city. I think I was living in Philly, and then I moved to DC or something. And he said it took him a second, because he remembers people, but it's specific to the city, right?
Yes.
The context helps him be like, oh yeah, you're that person, right? So it's kind of exactly that same thing. So to try to recreate
that makes
the situation
sense.
in which the memory was formed.
Because you can see somebody and you know them, but you're trying to figure out okay, was that from high school, college, after college, in where you live? Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, exactly.
This also gets to, the whole idea of attaching a mnemonic to that. I can totally see the drummer saying, oh, that's Philly Ari. You can kind of make that.
Yep.
This goes back to one of my very favorite books, The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci, which is all about using memory and how, he taught he was a priest, and he went to spread religion to the Chinese, and in exchange was able to teach this idea of memory palaces, where you build this structure in your head and assign memories, facts, things to names, places to it, and for some people. The stories I always seem to hear are like, hey, he was in prison for 20 years and developed a skyrise in his brain and could remember anything. But, it is a practice. It is a practice one can develop to help memory. So anyway, I appreciate your insights on that.
I can always tell when my husband had an idea or something he wants to remember in the middle of the night, because he always throws something in the middle of the floor.
Yeah,
so,
what a great idea.
So there'll be like a piece of clothing, or like there'll be something in his sink, and I'm like, oh, he's trying to remember something he thought of last night.
Well, it's another trick.
But that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the thing of like tie a piece of string around your finger.
Yeah.
Right. Like almost never is that a reminder to buy more string.
Right.
Right.
You end up a string hoarder and a run on string.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yet again, used up all our string. Gotta go buy some more.
I gotta get some more.
I wish I remembered to actually, pay the electric bill. So, hey, look, all right, this has been fantastic as always. You're a gentleman and scholar.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you being here with us. Where do you want to send people to learn more about your work? Doing anything fun?
Probably best place is adultadhdbook.com, and that's got a bunch of information. It's got some recordings and book chapters and stuff like that.
Excellent.
Yeah. And you'll be speaking at the ADHD conference, which
I will.
is in Dallas this year in November.
It
so
is.
all of our listeners, if you're around there, you should go.
Yeah, the first in-person conference in 3 years, which is going to be awesome.
Yes.
Like, I cannot wait.
Yes, I'll be there. I have my plane ticket all ready to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be way too excited.
It'll be nice to reconnect with people in person.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been a long time. So.
All those awesome conversations in the hallway, loitering in the lobby.
Exactly.
All that stuff.
The bar.
Great. So good. The bar.
Speaking of state-dependent memory, good luck with that. Well,
exactly.
this has been a real treat. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us, for downloading and listening to this show. We sure appreciate all that you do for us and your time and attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to the conversation, we're headed over to the Show Talk channel in our Discord server. You can join us right over there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Ari Tuckman and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.